you kind of, obviously the pro scene is a little bit different than here in the amateur kind of things here where you're kind of got that plat diamond thing. But we've seen Aphelios really start to shine in multiple different ways. So it's not really surprising to me to see that champion. We kind of thought Jinx and Caitlyn were really kind of the two strongest ADCs coming into this year. Well, it's Aphelios who's won those 3 games. And of course, you don't really have huge sample sizes on a lot of champions just yet. We're only in week 3. But it's hard to argue with 3 games, no losses. It's definitely a champion that I think a lot more people should be looking at, especially when you pair it up with things that can enable the Aphelios as well. So I'm looking for that to maybe kind of become more of maybe a contested pick as we move into week 3 and beyond.
Yeah, and I think the Jin as well, you can see sitting at 5-2, definitely a champion that a lot of people are comfortable with. Curious to see that the Tristana showing up on the highest loss rate, because I'm pretty sure there's only one team in the league that picks that, which is UO Gold, and they've won 1 game with it, lost the other 2 games with it. So that's an interesting statistic there. But you just look at the prevalence of Jinx and Leona, it just seems as if those are such high priority champions that aren't getting it done. So maybe we'll see some changes happening. Maybe we'll see the rise of some other champions come through, but that Jinx, not doing so hot so far is really interesting because we talk about that holy trinity of 80 carries. We talk about Jinx, Caitlyn, and Jin. Now you've got to start thinking, Aphelios got to start heading up that list there. Maybe we're starting to take the Jinx out of that list and looking at some other options, but
Yeah.
realistically, we've just got to see what these teams can bring out as we move on into the season.
Yeah, and I mean, we take a look at the 2 teams that have won with Jinx this season, Adam. One, Stun Gaming Mythos. They won earlier in the year. And then number 2, well, Dorado Gaming Gamma. So your 2 wins are teams sitting at the top of the standings, which really kind of tells you other teams, maybe, I don't quite know. Maybe Jinx is still the strong pick, but of course we'll wait and see, like you said. Now we take a look at most picked and most banned. Well, Adam, I'm not surprised
I am
at the
not
top,
surprised
but
either here.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised.
No, I think that everyone expected the Corki to be one of the most banned champions and Victor to be one of the most picked champions. I think one of the main things is with the Corki Victor meta being a thing right now, it's that a lot of people end up banning that Corki because it's easier to play. You can end up just scaling to incredible heights. You use those rockets to get so much poke damage down. Whereas Victor takes a little bit more skill. I think it's more so throwing down the gauntlet saying, you can take that Victor. We will take something else that can play the game a little bit easier if you ban that Corki out. So no surprise there. But other things to note here, the Viego really high ban rate, but you saw 3-0 in games that it has made it through. The Gwen being really high priority in terms of bans as well is interesting because it's not a champion that we've seen a whole lot of, but we've seen it banned a whole lot. And I think part of that is due to the prevalence in pro play right now, where Gwen is one of the best champions in the top lane. You get so much split push pressure, you get a lot of solo kill pressure, you're good early, mid, late. That's something that not a lot of top laners have. So, especially when you're playing those tanks, you want to take that away. But yeah, Jinx and Leona being up there and having some really high loss rates is definitely perplexing to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna straight up say it. I still think Jinx and Leona are quite strong, but sometimes this Jinx is getting picked up into straight team diff. Uh, you know, the champion itself might be good, but if you play it into a team such as Stun Eating Mythos and of course Dorado Gaming Epsilon, who have those larger champ pools, it might inflate it. I'm gonna still die on that hill and say Jinx is one of the best AD carries alongside Leona. I refuse to say Leona is a bad support by any means, just because of what she can bring to the table. But I just don't know if they're being captained to their full potential here at the moment. So, Adam, with that being said, I think it's time we take a look at some predictions. I don't know about you. What do you think?
Yeah, this is the fun part where we get to open up predictions and see uh, where we're sort of placing our bets, hedging our bets, so to speak. And I think that one of the biggest things to notice is that there's definitely some favorites in these matchups here, but there's a couple of them that are off the rails here. Honestly, now I get to ask you the question here, LaRue. Fake Smiles over UO Gold here, as well as KFC over Dorado Gaming Gamma. Walk me through what you're thinking with those ones.
All right, you want me to defend it? Well, I really can't here at the moment because it's only been 2 weeks. And, that's kind of one of the problems here early on. It's really hard to draw conclusions. But from what I've seen, and of course, I've seen bits and pieces, I've obviously tuned in a little bit last week. Fake Smiles crew seems to have that wild card potential. I really think that they've got some tricks and tips and tricks and whatever you want to call it up their sleeve that I'm not sure a lot of teams are ready for. Sitting at 2-2, I mean, they're obviously mid-table here at the moment alongside several other teams, but I think you got to give it to him here in this instance. And I think I was the last one to fill out my predictions for this week. And so, I maybe felt like I needed to kind of differentiate a little bit as well. But honestly, that's not the only reason. The biggest reason, I think they've got some tricks. I like with their style. I think they're hard to pick against. And I think that's why they're going to win. Now, KFC over Dorado Gaming Gamma. Obviously, everybody likes an upset. I will say it. It would be an upset if KFC does overcome, but at the end of the day, I liked what I saw from Kung Fu Cats in week number 2. Of course, everybody saw the shellacking they gave to Obsidian Esports Oblivion, excuse me, OEO at the end of last week. So I'm kind of basing it on hype. I think that's a severe momentum builder. I know OEO 0-4 on the year, but I think it's enough. And we know that Dorado Gaming is not unbeatable this season. Both teams already with one loss. So I think that one is definitely one to keep an eye on. Of course, we're gonna get some answers to questions today. But I think that one is definitely upset alert for sure. But of course, we take a look at him. Now it's time to flip it on to you because you didn't really differentiate much from our lovely, lovely Zai. But the one thing I noticed is you got Squid Champions going above Fake Smiles crew. So you get to talk us through that one.
So my main thing behind Squid Champions is that they were able to pull out the absolute cheese last week on stream, pulling out the Twitch top lane, pulling out this roaming style. And at first I was pretty skeptical about it, but now you've seen a week of LCS playing on this patch. We've seen Smite Janna top lane, we've seen Smite Karma top lane, we've seen Ivern mid, Soraka mid. It brings a whole new angle to the sort of league in a sense. It's bringing some different flares that I don't think all of these teams are going to be prepared for. So I think they're going to pull out some sort of cheese today. They definitely talked about it when we had the interview with Zell just last week. So I'm curious to see how that works out. But then we get to our power rankings overall here. And I think that this is something that takes a little bit more thought because we can look at Jai's here. I don't think there's too much surprise about the top 3 teams in this league, but it takes a little bit more to look at the rest of the league as a whole. And I think if we look at your rankings, Lou, as well, we can see what teams are sort of in that middle of the pack. And I want to get your thoughts on, at this point, it's really early to say, but who do you think is going to make playoffs? Because we know it's not, no, not everyone can make playoffs. It's going to be 6 teams.
Yes. I mean, we take a look here, and I think, like you said, I think the top 3 is 100% secure at the moment. I think Stun Gaming and the 2 Dorado Gaming teams are going to be the forerunners. Now, what positions they all finish in, well, that's yet to be seen. Obviously, we still have quite a few more weeks in regards to that. But you take a look here at the others, and there you go. There's my power rankings in particular. Obviously, like I said previously, I highly rate KFC Augusta and Fake Smiles crew. So I have them at 4 and 5. Now, a lot of people haven't been talking about ID Solaris yet. I think that's a team we've got to look at here as a potential kind of dark horse for getting that 6th spot. Now, because of records, I'm giving it over to Glaive at the moment and just kind of looking at the numbers and all of that. But I think you have maybe, I mean, obviously, every team's still very much in it. I think about the top 8. Maybe even Squid Champions at this point, I think have a legitimate chance. Obviously, there's still a lot of shifting that can happen. I mean, one win could send you rocketing at this point. So, I mean, it's so hard because the middle of the pack is so close in terms of talent that I think it's too hard to make a solid prediction here at the moment. But you'll see. Adam, your predictions, or your power rankings, I should say, not so much different from mine.
Yeah, they're not too different right now. I think it's still just granted because of how the records are playing out. And a lot of these teams have sort of played against people in a similar zone of their own. And for me, I could have been really biased. I could have been like, yo, you Ottawa, there's my team. Go up, way up the list. But realistically, sitting at 1-3 right now, there's still a lot for them to figure out. But as you said, top 8 is really where I think um, I need to draw my line in a sense as well. Squid Champions and Oblivion Esports Obsidian, though, they still have time to sort of make up some ground. I think Oblivion Esports Obsidian, they need to have a really good showing this week because they've got some really tough opponents that they're going up against. But realistically, if we're looking at strength of schedule here, you Ottawa this week, they have a chance to move up. ID Solaris have a really tough week. Fake Smiles crew have a little bit of an easier week, but Oblivion Esports Obsidian have one of the toughest weeks I think that you could have, as well as Glaive Esports Crimson. So realistically, we could see all of these teams shuffled around, but really depends on what these top 3 teams are doing, because Stun Gaming Mythos has been that one consistent factor throughout the season that we kind of have to talk about their mid laner, Wee Little Otter, just a little bit before we get into champ select in that, because he's come out of nowhere. He's come in as the new mid laner for Stun Gaming Mythos, and we've got this consistent force from Dorado Gaming, Epsilon, and Kanji. It's really hard to see who is the number one mid laner right now. Leroux, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's really about the king and his challenger. I know we're a young league around here, but as far as the king goes, I think it's Kongi. I mean, Kongi is the top guy and was the top guy in season 0. But Wee Little Otter, he's come in and he's had some seriously impressive performances. And of course, uh we've got a few more weeks to be had, but it's hard. It's pretty hard to say Kongi's not standing at the top alongside Wee Little Otter at this point. And everybody kind of loves the new kid, so I'm gonna have to say Kongi for now. I'm gonna have to be the villain of the rookie story, but Kongi's gonna have to watch out because they're two very talented players on two kind of different champion pools. Of course, Kongi's got his Yasuo. Wee Little Otter looked really good on the Vex.
And the Akali as
It
well.
and the Akali, yeah. I was waiting for you to say that, but uh, we've got some great mid laners in the league this year, and that makes my heart happy as the mid laner here. So it does make my heart happy a little bit to see those two popping off early on.
Yeah, and I think the big game that I'm looking at our schedule right now for, it's gonna be in week 5. It's gonna be Dorado Gaming Epsilon versus Stunned Gaming Mythos. Last game of the season for those 2 teams, and it's gonna be kind of figuring out who will end up with that mid lane crown at the end of the day. Because once All Stars come around, it's gonna be incredibly hard for either of us to pick one or the other at this point. While Kongi has shown skill throughout a full season already, so we know the skills that he has, there have been some games where he has a little bit too much fun, I think, and that can sometimes hamper the stock. It really depends on what you want to look for. I think that both of these mid laners are incredibly strong. Both of them have a huge skill set in tow. And it's exciting to watch them no matter which side of the coin you're on. I think that both of them bring that little bump of energy that sometimes we like to see out of those mid laners. But regardless, there is still more to be seen here. I'm really curious to see how the rest of the season turns out for them, because thus far, I think that they've got to be 1A and 1B. I don't think you can really differentiate the two of them.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, both of those teams have really good enablers around both Kongi and Wee Little Otter. You're not a no mid laner is complete without their crew. I know mid lane is the superstar. Mid lane, you have your Bjergsons, you have your Jensens, you have the players that are the superstar. That's most likely where you're gonna find that superstar. Of course, now Cloud9's kind of turning that all on its head. It's all about the AD carry. Meanwhile, the mid lane has just been relegated to support. But you got to give credit to Assault, the sides of Epsilon and Mythos as well, because we remember week 1. Kongi got his Yasuo, but they built the comp around it. You have Wee Little Otter. He's got a top 380 carry in Bergeron. Lightless, Senji, and Daddy's E-Kitten have been impressive as well. So, two very good crews combined with two very great mechanical mid laners. I mean, I think those two teams are really the best. I know I put Gamma at number 2. That's just kind of without
It's really
without
close.
knowledge between the two, you can't really put one above. We can't really put one Dorado team over the other quite just yet. So I'm super excited. I mean, like you said, week 5, it's going to be a blast. I don't see either of these teams dropping off. So it is really going to be the king against the challenger. And oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, and in some ways we get the Dorado Civil War next week as well. So there's a lot of really
We'll
cool matchups
know.
towards the
We'll
end
know.
of the season. Yeah, we will know sort of where everything starts to hash out. And like it sounds really dumb. Yeah, you'll just figure out who's the strongest team once they've all played each other because
Yeah,
records
it
speak
turns
for
out beating
themselves.
another team is the best way to move up in the power rankings. It's almost like, I'm not going to say power rankings are inherently flawed, but it's based on a lot of what ifs.
Yeah,
And, we treat Epsilon like the big brother team, but Gamma hasn't looked like the little brother in the slightest.
Gamma's the older
So,
team.
yeah,
Gamma's been around
exactly.
longer,
Like,
so I mean,
Epsilon is only the older brother in the fact that they played in season 0.
yes.
So, I mean, it's we'll see. We'll see how the Dorado Civil War comes up. But of course, Adam, we've got more coming up here this week. Unfortunately, we won't get to see. We'll get to see both the Dorado gaming teams here today,
Yes.
but we won't see them against each other. We do have 3 streamed tonight. And what game are you perhaps most looking forward to here today?
I think the one that's really going to give a little bit more perspective to how the league is going to be our first matchup of the day. Fake Smiles Crew versus EO Gold. Both of those teams are in that mix, that, the 5-team mix outside of the top 3. They're the ones that are all fighting for playoffs right now. I think it's really important to see EO Gold kind of pick up another victory for themselves. They were able to beat KFC last week, and looking at the power rankings, you would expect them to be able to take down Fake Smiles Crew. But as you said yourself, Fake Smiles Crew is a strong team. They've got themselves a nice little niche in the league thus far. They're on the upswing as well. It's really going to be who can keep their momentum, because if you Gold are able to take down Fake Smiles Crew, it kind of vaults them ahead of the middle of the pack because they've already played those 3 really tough opponents. I believe they've played against Dorado Gaming Epsilon and they played against Stunned Gaming Mythos. So realistically, they just need one more win somewhere in that mess of things, and then you've got to face Dorado Gaming Gamma. It's sort of like they have to win this one. It's a must win for both of these teams, I think, because of strength of schedule moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, you mentioned the first game as the most exciting. I'm going to go one step further. I think the most interesting game of the day is going to be Dorado Gaming Gamma taking on KFC Augusta. Of course, KFC, I mean, I picked the upset. And like I said, I'm going to call it like it is. It would be quite an upset. But I feel like there's a lot of question marks to be had in that game because, of course, KFC Augusta aren't going to be fielding quite the same roster as they did in prior weeks. So we're, there is a question of uncertainty there that I think is going to be answered. That one I think could go either way. I really, you say let's make Fake Smiles Crew and UO Gold or UO Ottawa Gold, however you
Yes.
want to call them, UOG.
Whatever works for you.
U Ottawa, Adams School. Go Garnet. Uh, I think we know those teams. We've seen them. But KFC Augusta is kind of the big question mark at 2-2. I think they're going to see their season kind of take a nosedive here this week, or they're going to become kind of a team that can really sit outside that top 3, if not enter that top 3, depending on how tonight goes. And we're going to find out. So I'm really excited to see that one. Of course, IDS also, special shout out to our 3rd game. All 3 games are important
All
today.
games are nice.
But IDS is going to be going for the upset too. So I think that's worth showing. IDS, I think they've already lost to Gamma, but they can at least try to take some revenge here on the other side of Dorado Gaming and take down Epsilon. Of course, not an easy task, but a lot of talent. And, we've already seen several upsets and then none of themselves. So what's one more, Adam? What is one
What?
more?
Yeah, exactly. What is one more? But we should be heading into Champ Select for Game 1 in the next little bit shortly. But I want to point out as well, while the side of UO Gold were able to take down KFC Augusta, they lost to ID Solaris last week. So realistically, it's like, KFC
It's
loses to UO Gold, loses to ID Solaris, loses to KFC. It's like you get into those cycles where it's like, we're going to end up with a whole bunch of tiebreakers at the end of the season, and it's going to be an absolute mess by the time week 5 comes around. That It's
Yeah.
all up for grabs at that
Like
point,
I said,
right?
this week is legitimately about battling for mid-table supremacy. You have so many teams at 2-2. You have a few teams at 1-3. Of course, Living Esports Obsidian trying to bounce their way back into things. Like, you've got several storylines here at the middle of the week. This is kind of make or break for plenty of these teams because after this, there's only 4 more games each. Well, thereabouts, 4 more games for each. So we're going to get a clear picture after today, and some teams can really kind of walk themselves in. But with that being said, Adam, Fancy, we're getting into Champion Select here.